Yeah, we'll get to you later, Chocolate Brony. So I'm going to give myself a pat on the back here for spotting this festering turd early on. The ongoing saga at Evergreen State University is now over a month old and has caught the attention of a Washington State Senate Law and Justice Committee. Not only that, Evergreen president and all-round useful idiot George Bridges was forced to call in state police for protection after repeatedly calling on his own campus police to stand down. The president of Evergreen State College is asking the state for police protection following recent protests on campus, during which he ordered his own campus police to stand down. President George Bridges told local lawmakers on Tuesday that the university cannot rely solely on the lean public safety presence that has been the tradition, even though Bridges himself has been responsible for the leanness of that presence on at least 2 occasions. Our hard-working law enforcement officers need the training, equipment and staffing levels necessary to ensure their continued ability to protect all on our 1,000-acre campus. I'll be seeking help from the legislature to meet the challenges of campus safety. Oh really, George? Well, if you tell them to stand down, how are they expected to protect the campus? Remember, George even asked the head of campus police to show up to the Maoist struggle session unarmed because of the irrational fear of hysterical students who then just set about berating and insulting him.
The call that I received today was that there was a faculty member that was trapped by several students.
And then on June 20th, during the Washington State Law and Justice Committee, this interesting exchange came up.
Well, speaking of public safety, one of the issues that the students brought up, one of the concerns people have had is whether or not your local police force is able to be armed on campus as a public safety measure to protect students, faculty, and staff, to protect somebody from a active shooter or something that unfortunately has happened in other campuses around the country. What position did you take on that? And then later, of course, you paid the State Patrol to come in, who are presumably all armed. What is the status of that?
I'll address it briefly, and then I'll let our chief speak. I'm losing my voice. Our officers are armed, but they do need additional training and equipment and additional support. Frankly, sir, we are a leanly staffed organization. The college has made some decisions historically that has invested resources in academic programs and supports and less resources in our police services unit. That needs to change. So with that, I'd be happy to introduce our chief, and she can speak as well.
And that's true. George has been at Evergreen for a year and a half and is not responsible for the historic position of police services. And my intention is not to say that he is, but rather that his statements here and elsewhere in his testimony are at odds with things that he's previously said and done.
Thank you, sir. Yes, we do have handguns. We do not have rifles. We are the only university in the state university that does not have rifles for active shooter situations. But we are armed.
What about additional law enforcement?
What do you mean?
Senator Oldman?
Just that comment invited a, I think, response. So is it a funding issue you don't have rifles, or it's some sort of a philosophical reason you don't have it?
It's philosophical.
Does it concern you, though, that if you had an active shooter, that might be a necessary, and I don't know law enforcement and the importance of having rifles, but I'm just
It concerns me greatly. We should have rifles, in my opinion.
Oh, okay. So whose decision was it not to have rifles? It wasn't you. It wasn't your department.
It's not me.
Do you know whose decision that was?
The college administration.
Can I ask President Bridges something?
Please.
Do you want to respond to that, President?
Well, there's been a lot. This issue has been with Evergreen for many years. I'm here. This is my 19th month, I think. We're looking at that issue, and there are many needs that our police services units has. Certainly, they are seeking this.
So you mentioned earlier you don't have any deep experience in law enforcement.
No, sir.
And so you would want to defer to those who have that experience, whose main job it is to keep the campus safe, wouldn't you?
We are in conversation about that very issue.
Okay, and you've got a chief right next to you who just said publicly you need to have rifles, particularly after shooters. It seems to me you've got your answer at what you need to do.
I heard her, sir.
Yeah, but how are you going to sell that to the baying mob who you praised as courageous, George, and that demanded, quote, the immediate disarming of police services and no expansion of police facilities or services at any point in the future? To which your reply was, annual training for police officers will be expanded because of the responsibility they hold and the critical services they provide to the college. The training will include techniques for safe and non-threatening engagement with students, addressing anti-black racism, de-escalation, minimising use of force, serving trans and queer students sexual assault response, and responding to the access and special needs of students with disabilities. Private funding will be sought to support training. We intend to retain a campus police force that understands and is responsive to the unique needs of our college campus. So the only expansion you proposed before this hearing was a form of sensitivity training, a minimisation of use of force, and retaining a police force that is unique to the needs of the college, which sounds a lot like retaining the status quo. I don't know about you, but I don't think Georgie boy can be trusted on this issue. And that's not the only piece of questionable testimony from good old George. Remember this?
So you don't have to watch that door, watch all the doors, watch the windows. You need to keep eyes on them. And somebody needs to go in that room real quick to make sure that there's no way to get that room for them. Both of them.
Well, here's what George had to say about that now.
I felt perfectly safe in that environment. I feel perfectly safe with college students. I didn't like the way they spoke with me, sir, but I felt safe.
Could you have left? Could you have left?
I believe I could have, yes, sir.
All right. Yeah, some of the videos maybe would call that in question, but you felt you could have left and left safely and there wouldn't have been any consequences?
You know, being in the room, I felt comfortable. I knew the students, and I felt as though I could leave. Yes, sir.
So George feels like he could have left whilst a contingent of social justice lunatics were charged with making sure he couldn't. And he didn't really answer the question. He may have been able to leave via a window or pushing his way out, but without any consequences? Highly doubtful. George also now says he doesn't endorse the letter written by 50 of the faculty that called for an investigation of Bret Weinstein.
50, I believe it's 50 of his colleagues file a complaint against him. What concerns me, I'd like to get your reaction, what concerns me about that is that, to me, that perpetuates the notion that there are certain views that are that should not be tolerated, that the faculty itself is filing a complaint against this professor for expressing, albeit a controversial viewpoint that I think was frankly fairly reasonable. What's your reaction to that?
Senator, fair question. My sense was that the reaction on the part of faculty, which I did not encourage, and was not to his original expression, but it was to working through media to communicate information about the college. I think that was their objection. I could be corrected on that. But I think they were concerned that, as some of us were, that as announcements were made on the media about the college, there were misrepresentations of what had happened and who we were. And let me just finish.
To which he was responsible, you think, for those misperceptions in the media?
I'd be really reluctant to make a commitment on that, to make a statement on that. I don't think that's appropriate. But I think the concern was there was an onslaught of messages that came from sources with no connection to the college across the country, anonymous and very venomous statements.
Fair enough, but why would you attribute those to Professor Weinstein and have that be a reason for him to be complained against by his faculty? I don't understand that connection.
I didn't attribute it to him, but I believe some of the faculty did.
What was Weinstein supposed to do if not go to the media? He was told not to attend the university because they couldn't guarantee his safety. The faculty are just pissed because their private witch hunt has now been made public. And is Weinstein under investigation?
Okay.
Is the Professor Weinstein under investigation now?
No.
All right.
And what of our friend the chocolate brony?
And there were reports of a lot of damage done to campus buildings from smashed windows and other things. Can you confirm whether or not the damage occurred and whether that's part of the investigation that's ongoing?
It is part of the investigation. There was damage that occurred, and I believe the valuation of the damage was $5,000.
Okay. There was also reports and even some videos of students carrying baseball bats around campus. Did that occur to your knowledge?
My understanding is that's being investigated as a criminal act by our police services unit.
Who had those baseball bats again? Well, wouldn't you know it? Don't they make an intimidating sight? The purple people eater there probably would run out of breath on her backswing. So it's good they're under criminal investigation, but can George really afford to discipline Pink, Brony and friends? Surely that will incur the wrath of the social justice loonies and the 50 deluded faculty members. No doubt he'll be branded a racist and be guilty of endangering the lives of trans people or some other SJW speak. So I think George has gotten himself into a bit of a pickle. Professor Bret Weinstein is not under investigation and there are no grounds for his dismissal. George has publicly said he doesn't support the faculty members that called for an investigation into Weinstein, yet he's fully committed to carrying out their strategic equity plan, a euphemism for radical affirmative action. He's under pressure from the state and his own campus police to bolster police presence on campus whilst trying to appease students that want less police presence. And George may have to sign off on disciplinary action on some of those same students, a measure bound to be unpopular with the most vocal noisemakers. In my opinion, a man that has to ask his students permission to take a piss doesn't have what it takes to make the tough decisions. George is one of those useful idiots that would willingly hold open the gates to help the barbarians take the city. If George were running a private corporation, he'd have been sacked weeks ago for his incompetence. But perhaps we should give the last word to the only other sane voice within the Evergreen faculty willing to speak up, Professor Michael Parris.
This is a story of how a Democrat voting veterinarian working with mostly Republican livestock owners became a bigoted professor at a left-wing progressive liberal arts college. It is about a collection of professors that are so blinded by their advocacy that they cannot fathom different viewpoints. It involves a newly appointed president who believes in ideological safe spaces, who endorsed a strategic equity plan that will hurt the very students it is trying to help. Following student protests and controversy about the day of absence, day of presence, Evergreen administrators sent out ominous notices labeling free speech advocates and persons who simply do not agree with official campus opinion as potentially violent. It was a desperate move, using fear tactics to rally the masses and prevent students from thinking clearly. That morning was the first time that I was actually nervous coming to campus, not because of threats of white supremacists, but because I was worried that someone on campus would think that I might be one of them. And then we got the alert on campus. I could see the fear in some of our students' faces as I helped escort a student of color to her dormitory. Then I decided to stay on campus for a while, and an administrator approached and asked, "How did we get to this point?" I guess safe spaces can be dangerous places. What I meant by this is that if we protect students from ideas that may upset them because they are different than their own, we also create fear of people who have different viewpoints, including the invasion of physical safe spaces. And these are the spaces that do need to be protected. In my opinion, the primary purpose of an education is to free students from narrow perspectives, limited thinking, and partisanship in order to obtain knowledge. In fact, one of the 5 foci of learning at Evergreen is learning across significant differences. Of course, these differences include race, gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, religion, etc. But more importantly, students need to learn across ideological differences. When social justice is institutionalized in a manner that fundamental questions about justice, equity, diversity, sustainability, etc., are discouraged, then the institution cannot be inclusive nor educational. We are left with a campus population that is incapable of self-reflection, who reinforces their own beliefs at the expense of others. Once Evergreen implicitly adopts a particular vision and value system, then it takes away freedom of thought and decision-making from individuals that are members. At the end of each year, the college asks students to write an academic statement where they candidly reflect upon their shortcomings while discussing their future educational goals. In order for Evergreen to move forward from this, we have to do the same thing that we are asking of our students. This means taking responsibility and undergoing sincere self-examination. By refocusing our mission as a college that teaches students how to think rather than what to think, we can restore our reputation as a premier learning institution.
And given that it's the end of the month, I just want to thank all my patrons for their ongoing support of the channel. Your generosity is much appreciated. I'll see you next time.